Welcome back to this episode of the Iowa Beef Collective. I am your host, Patrick Wall, and we are here at the Bridgeview Center, taping a number of episodes on a wide range of topics here at the Corn Belt Cow-Calf Conference. And with me is an old friend and a former roommate there at Iowa State, Dr. Matt Spangler. He's here to give a genetics-focused talk, and we're going to sort of dive into not just his talk, but get some insight on what he thinks here in the industry from a genetic selection standpoint, maybe where our focus should be. So, Matt, introduce yourself to the audience, give us your pedigree, and kind of what you've been working on at UNL.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me on. I'm a native Kansan, grew up on a farm and ranch in south central Kansas. Like any good Kansan, I attended Kansas State, member of a livestock judging team there. Then matriculated Iowa State for my master's. That's where you and I really got to know each other, office mates there at ISU, and then completed my PhD at the University of Georgia. And I've been at the University of Nebraska in Lincoln since 2008. Have a three-way appointment, extension, research, and a minor teaching apportionment. And my extension and research really work together. So really work with beef breed associations and producers, both seed stock and commercial, at really developing and deploying genetic selection tools and methods.
Your talk here tomorrow is sort of the yin and yang, if you will, on the genetic selection front. Let's dig into that a bit. There are some antagonisms that we've always fought, but from the maternal side and the terminal side, we're making cows bigger. We're making them a lot bigger. I don't think we really know how big we're making them, but we're killing 1,700-pound steers. So the cows are going to be, fairly large. So let's talk about the genetic selection tools that you're going to discuss tomorrow on the antagonisms that are out there.
Well, you're exactly right. Those problems have always existed, but we've probably gotten away with it for a long time because we didn't kill really heavy fat cattle. And the challenge is that beef cattle producers expect a bull to do everything. Yep. They're going to make replacement females that are profitable, and they're going to make those 1,700-pound fat cattle. And that's really a tough thing to do. But there have been tools that have been available for a very long time that help us. One that's overlooked is really the breeding system. So the thought that beef cattle producers have to retain their own replacement females just isn't the case. They can purchase replacement females, preferably crossbred females, and those don't have to be bred heifers. Those could be bred cows coming with their second or third calf. They're bred to be maternal, then they turn out a terminal sire that really maximizes growth, pounds, and they can have the best of both worlds. The reluctance of that is probably twofold. One, but the heifers I raise are better than everyone else's. Better how, right? And then the other is, but it's my hay I'm feeding those developing heifers, and so I can do it cheaper. Well, maybe, but have you really put a pencil to it? Because your hay's not maybe as cheap as you think it is, and your labor's not free. So I think breeding system design helps us get there. From a bull selection perspective, we've got mature cow weight EPDs. People can keep an eye on that. And, the old joke was everybody thinks they've got 1,200-pound cows, and now you say that and people think, well, yeah, actually, I know I don't. And that's continued to creep up. So although people's revenues increase, their cost has too, and you start to worry about long-term profitability. So to me, it all starts with making sure that breeding system is allowing you to do what you need to do.
And here in southern Iowa, it's cow country, but the average cow size or the average cow herd is still probably under 30 head. And I think I saw a figure years ago that 70% of the bulls that are sold are expected to be what you mentioned, the be-all, end-all. They got to mate heifers, they got to mate cows. And I think we've gotten away from the three-breed rotational and the F1 on the terminal sire. Those systems, that thought process has kind of eroded.
I agree with that. And for those herds that have 10, 20, 30, 40 cows, if you think about the the heifer development program and then also the heifer calving program, that's a small number of females that they got to sort off and treat differently. And if you have that number of cows, obviously cattle production is not the breadwinner in terms of revenue for the family.
Even now.
Yeah, even now. Even now it's not. And so you've got to ask yourself, is that added work, including night calving of those heifers,
Right.
Does that make sense? And could you outsource that whole bit to somebody else? And I mentioned the buying replacement females that are older. You reduce dystocia. They're easier to breed back. You get cows in a more productive period of their life. And so at that point, if cattle is kind of the secondary component to what you're doing, make it a bit more enjoyable and probably a bit more profitable at the same time.
Right. And I think a lot of producers, particularly here in Iowa, because corn and soybeans are the driver for most folks, they look at their beef enterprise as something to eat the road ditches and the places we can't farm type thing. So I still think that genetically there is an opportunity for even those producers to shift focus and do exactly what you said. And particularly in the market that we're in, failures now cost you a lot more than they used to. And your cows are bigger. They're eating more. They're costing more. All of those things on that side of the ledger are harder. So I hope tomorrow that some folks will listen in and say, wait a minute, maybe there's a better, easier way to do this that actually makes us more money. So I'm glad to hear you say that.
Yeah, I think you're right. And you hit on something that I think's really interesting. I teach an undergraduate class that's responsible for conducting our annual bull sale, second Saturday in April, in Lincoln.
Shameless plug.
But I asked them, so what's one of the largest determining factors of bull price in our sale? Price of corn. Because people have extra money from the row crop enterprise to spend on bulls. So what you said brought that to my attention, because I think even for those people, they ought to expect the cattle enterprise to kind of pay its own way.
Sure.
And so when they go out and think about buying a bull, something I'd like to stress to them is expect a return on investment from that bull purchase decision. And often people don't think about it that way. And if they get on the wrong side of the cattle market, because they spent too much on the bull, they price in a loss on their calves.
Yep.
So thinking about buying a bull and will that bull return on the investment, I think is really important. And the other thing I'd mentioned relative to economics, making sure those cows last. A cow fails the first time as a heifer, she's got a lot of value yet, particularly in this market. She fails as a 2 or 3, that really starts to hurt. And so focusing on things like stayability, sustained cow fertility, functional longevity, that's the name of the EPDs we have, really gets at cow depreciation cost.
Sure.
And that's something that a lot of producers don't think about, but that's a huge cost. So making those females last longer, I think, is really important.
I've actually been doing for several years now an exercise where I actually force attendees to calculate their own cow depreciation. And it's a number that for some of them, when they get down to the bottom of the page, they look at it and go, there's no way that's right. It's right. And I let them use their own prices, their own replacement rate. It's all their own numbers so that the math doesn't lie. And in a market like this, we're risking more on every animal than we ever have before. So to get it right is probably more crucial than it's ever been. Is there anything else tomorrow that folks can tune in and say, I did not know that before, maybe I should change my approach? What else, what nuggets do you have?
So you mentioned at the beginning this kind of yin and yang, which is really the maternal versus terminal. And of course, a lot of producers try to do both. And the question is always, well, how do I strike some kind of balance? Mm-hmm. To me, the balance is struck economically. And I talk to people about the idea of planning horizons. So, if you've got an investment portfolio and you work with a financial advisor that are going to ask you about your tolerance to risk and when you plan to retire, which I know for livestock producers or anyone in ag, right, retirement is not really a thought. That's kind of synonymous with being horizontal permanently. But the idea, though, is there's some time horizon. And if I want to maximize profit in the short term, I select for big cattle because that pays me in the short term.
Right.
If I want to maximize profit in the long haul, then I start thinking about, well, my cows need to be smaller. I need to have cows that last longer, so that increased stayability. So it's really thinking about when do I want to be profitable, over the long haul or in the short term, and that really helps focus that kind of balance between terminal and maternal. And I think serves as a check. Am I doing it right? And at the end of the day, it comes back to having a well-formed objective. What am I really trying to do, and how do my cattle perform now? Where do I need to put added effort?
And I talk with producers all the time, and many of them are probably as well versed and as intelligent about selection when it comes to putting a variety of corn or a variety of soybeans on a given acre. They do all their homework, and they say, well, there's just too much information in them sale books. I don't understand what any of it means. And then you open up the seed corn magazine, and they got more columns than we do. So I don't buy that, number one. And we, on the beef side, have actually made it simpler than any of the corn soybean companies because we give them indexes that piles it on top of each other. Talk about, is index selection something that a producer can just say, you know what, I don't understand all those columns, but I don't have to?
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. Economic selection indices. So you think of, in the Angus world, the dollar beef or the dollar M or dollar C, right? And there's examples from all other major breeds. That technology first developed in the early 1940s at Iowa State.
Yep.
Lenoy Hazel in his PhD work.
Yep.
And the beef cattle industry didn't really adopt it until the early 2000s. But it's a way of taking a lot of EPDs, weighting them economically, and putting it in one index value. And so I can select for bulls then that have more genetic potential to return profit given a particular objective I have, whether it's all terminal or I'm keeping back replacement females. I think it's a way to make bull selection a whole lot simpler, certainly a way at least to make that short list of bulls that you're really targeting. And I think people get into trouble with they go to a sale not having done any homework. They go around, they look at the bulls, and then we, of course, sell them at auction so people can't think on the fly.
Right.
And everything goes out of whack. It's like going to the grocery store with not having a list. You don't get anything you needed and still spend a bunch of money. So indexes, I think, can go a long ways in making what is a complicated process a lot easier.
I talk to producers and I say, well, what you should be after is this dollar value. That's the one should be your focus. And there's always a but. And a lot of times I'll give a prime example. Southern Iowa has toxic fescue everywhere. You go and select the high yearling weight, the high index bull, and you do it too many times in a row, you're in trouble. So I tell those folks, you don't need the highest number in any one column. You can chase the index and say, let's set a threshold. And then you go to a trait like milk, and you go the other way. The cows that are in trouble in toxic fescue country are the cows that are pretty large and milk their heart out. She's the one that'll most likely end up open. So I think there's ways you can use indexes and then also couple them with one or two traits that you need for your environment.
Yeah, everybody's herd's unique in some way, and everyone. Well, people that are profit motivated have the same goal, right? They want to increase the amount of net profit from their enterprise. And so it does come down to knowing how your cattle perform and then what level of trait, be it milk or mature weight or calving ease, right, do I need to emphasize to improve my profit further? And I think calving ease is a nice example. Probably a lot of people put way too much emphasis on it, and that's a risk aversion thing. They leave profit on the table because they're risk adverse. But it's knowing your herd, knowing your environment, and then using the tools that we know work to help increase profit.
I have some of the most well-versed, educated producers that they still want to know what the actual birth weight was on that bull.
Yeah.
We've been at this for 50 plus years. And there's some habits that are just darn hard to break.
They are, and I don't. My hope is that generational turnover might change that. And the reality is we provide people tools. We don't force them to use them.
Right.
But what I hope they understand is that they're giving something up by not using the science we know that works. And I think it's important, as we talk to youth and educate students in our undergraduate courses, that, Grandpa and Dad were very successful doing it the way they did, but you got to use science.
Yep.
And what amazes me, you mentioned the agronomy bit and planting hybrid corn. Right, we deploy science out the wazoo when it comes to the agronomy space. For whatever reason, we lag in cattle.
Yep.
And I don't understand that, but there's a lot of opportunity there that we haven't tapped into.
I guess we'll close on kind of a loaded question because I want to know your answer. You travel all over the country. You've been doing it a while on the genetic front. Is there, and maybe the answer is there's not one area, but I want to know across the country, genetic selection wise, what are we good at, and what is the area where we're not very darn good?
Good question. So what we're good at is making things bigger. So we have increased weight. And that's been in response to what industry's told us, right? Make carcass weights bigger.
Yep.
We do it. So we've been very effective at that. Something that we have failed at is implementing or leveraging heterosis like other species have. Pork's a great example, right? You buy pork in the grocery store, I can pretty much guarantee that's not purebred pork you're buying.
Right.
And there's a reason, because economically it makes sense.
Yep.
And we just have not capitalized on that in beef cattle like we need to.
Excellent. Well, I'm excited to hear what you have to say tomorrow, and we haven't caught up in a while, so it's good to see you again, but I appreciate you hopping on the podcast here and telling us kind of where your career's at with the genetic selection front. So excited for what you're going to talk about. As always, thanks for joining us. Find us on the socials. We're on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. Follow us on Facebook. We'll keep these episodes coming to you. Again, thanks for tuning in.
This institution is an equal opportunity provider. For the full non-discrimination statement or accommodation inquiries, go to www.extension.iastate.edu/legal.